Welcome to Backstories, the podcast where we dig deep into the untold tales behind the people, places, and moments that shape our world. Every month, we'll uncover the hidden narratives that inspire, surprise, and challenge us. So, grab your headphones and get ready to journey into the past, one backstory at a time.
One more first-time storyteller. So everybody be happy and friendly for Josh. His story is called In Life, There is an Invitation.
All right. So yeah, my name's Josh Patterson. I think so I do a podcast. I've been doing it for about 6.5 years. And I interviewed a dude one time called Rob Bell. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Rob Bell, but he's an interesting individual. Look him up. And Rob told me one time when I was interviewing him, he said, Josh, look, dude, there's an invitation in life where if you're willing to go deep enough into your own story, then maybe other people will be able to find themselves there as well. And so probably it's worth a go to go deep enough into your own story in the hopes that other people might find themselves there. So I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I'm going to go deep into my story, and maybe some of you will find yourselves there. And if not, fuck it, right? We're here. So here's how it goes. I used to be a pastor. That's a thing. I did it for 6 years. I graduated college, and I worked for an organization called Youth for Christ, and it was kind of super cool. I started like a fancy like club thing for high school kids. And then I was like, well, actually, I want to be like a real Christian, and I'm going to go be a pastor. So I got hired as a teaching pastor at a church in Boca Raton, Florida. And I was at that church for about 8 months, and it was 8 months too long. Okay, see, I was this young, I know I look young now, like, what are we, like 18, 19? Is that what y'all are thinking? I'm 30, okay? But I was a young kid, I was passionate, I wanted to help people. I got hired at this church to be a teaching pastor, and during my 8 months there, I experienced, and these are words that came from my therapist, emotional, verbal, spiritual, and borderline physical abuse at the hands of the people who hired me. Great, right? Lots of fun. So I left that place and I went to a different church. And I was hired there as a youth pastor. And while I was there, my time was a bit different. It didn't have the same sort of problems, like less assholery, less narcissistic kind of, energy. However, there was still this weird staff dynamic that wasn't necessarily healthy. And so I was there, it was cool, whatever. Ended up leaving. That place wasn't great, and I moved back to Baltimore, because that's where I'm from. Go Baltimore. And I worked at a church called Seneca Creek Community Church in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which was awesome. I have no complaints. But the damage was kind of like already done, so to speak, right? And so I noticed very quickly that the kind of anger and frustration that existed within me was not necessarily healthy to be handing off to other people. But at the same time, I was kind of sold this lie that my vocation was equivalent with who I was as a person. So I believed that Josh Patterson was a pastor, and anything outside of that was like a fuck you to God kind of thing. So I don't know. I was there for a time, like 1.5 years, and most of it was difficult internally because I felt like a fraud, like I was faking something. I had all these super cool students that I was working with, and they were great, lots of fun parents and different people, and sometimes they let me preach in big church, right? Because if you know anything about the church world, like youth pastors are only like kind of pastors, but everyone else is like better. That's like how it works. And sometimes let me speak in big church, and it was great. But ultimately I ended up not doing that anymore, and I became a brewer. And I made beer, which was fun. And it was weird because, one of the things that people report, if you don't know this, there's like a mass exodus happening from churches in America right now, like huge, big time, like insane numbers. And what people report is that the thing that they miss the most about their church experience is community and relationship. They had a community and a foundation, people that loved them, respected them, trusted them, and that was kind of taken away from them. And when your entire worldview is kind of blown up and the community that you had to foster you also goes away, it kind of sucks. And so I experienced that myself, but what I learned in breweries, I was like, holy shit, like this is kind of crazy. This is like what I thought church was supposed to be. Because like when I was brewing, so I brewed at, do we know Peabody Heights? Yeah, so I brewed for Peabody Heights, all right. And then I brewed at Full Tilt Brewing, RIP, they don't exist anymore. And then I brewed at Union. But what I learned is that in breweries, there's this weird thing where anybody could come in, from off the street, sit down at the bar, and they'd be welcomed for who they were. Beer has like this weird tendency to unite people. And so we would celebrate with those who needed to be celebrated. We would mourn with our friends who needed mourning. And it was like kind of crazy. No one gave a fuck what my Christology was, right? Or didn't like care if I was a superlapsarianism or whatever. Like it was weird, but also deeply helpful. And so I found community within beer after leaving the church. And what's interesting is I've continued my podcast. Like I said, I've been doing it for 6.5 years. It's called Rethinking Faith. Super into theology, super into philosophy. But what I've learned is this. I don't really give a fuck what people believe. I don't care. Belief is weird. It's feeble. It's fragile. Our beliefs shift and change over time. We don't often really have control over what we believe. But faith is a fundamental disposition. It's a way of being in the world. And I don't really know what I believe anymore. But what I've learned is that love seems to matter. Paul Tillich defined faith as our matter of ultimate concern. And Aaron Simmons, he's a philosopher, he says faith is risk in a direction. And we should ask ourselves, hey, we're all going to die one day, right? And so our finitude matters. So we should ask ourselves, what is worthy of our finitude? And then maybe do that thing. So if you combine that with Paul Tillich and say, faith is risk in a direction and love seems to be of ultimate concern, what would it look like if I oriented myself in the direction of love, if I risked my life in the direction of love, hoping that to be true? And then I try to do that. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but it's way better than being abused by some asshole narcissistic pastors. So maybe you should try it too. Thank you.
Cheers.